Well, good morning and welcome back. For those of you that I've not had the opportunity to meet, my name is Terry Pence. I'm the director of the Traffic Safety section with the Traffic Operations Division with TxDOT. And I would like to also thank you for being here this morning. And you've heard a lot of words mentioned this morning: passion, dedication, commitment. I just appreciate all the work that you're all doing in the impaired driving area to help get the impaired drivings off our streets and highways. We were off to a tremendous start this morning. I think we had just an incredible opening session. And we learned this morning that impaired driving is a problem that plagues communities not only throughout Texas, but all around the United States. And it's a major problem that we all need to continue to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And now what we're going to do is shift over to what's being done to address it here and elsewhere. For more than 30 years, Mothers Against Drunk Driving has been a major force in raising awareness about the impact of impaired driving and in supporting victims and their families. Through its staff and legions of volunteers working in thousands of communities across America, MADD has made a seismic shift in collaboration circles. Our next speaker is McDonald. He's a veteran of 24 years of law enforcement. He's a retired lieutenant of the Wyoming State Highway Patrol. He brings this valuable experience to his position as the National Law Enforcement Initiative Manager for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, where he's been a critical member of the national staff for more than 8 years. So please welcome McDonald to talk about how MADD's working to eliminate drunk driving and also update us on their activities.
As she came back to my car, she said to me, "My daughter has a question." It was 2002, and I was a lieutenant working out of headquarters in Cheyenne. And it was my practice to get up in the morning a little bit early on most days. And before I had to be at the office, I would get on the road and go out on one of the interstates. It helped me think, it helped me plan a little bit, and if I'm honest, it was a way that I used to kind of convince myself that I haven't lost that perishable talent that I had of working the road. Now, those who have work speed know that when you have somebody that's really clicking along, they're easy to spot. There's all these debates in the courtroom about whether or not you can estimate speeds accurately, but if you have somebody that's smoking along, you can tell. They virtually float along the road. And I had one of those comment at me as I was southbound that day, and she was coming up northbound. I clocked this car at 97 miles an hour, locked it in, turned through the median, made my traffic stop. I walked up to the car, and there was two people in the car, a woman and her daughter. Her daughter was mid-teens, pierced, tattooed a little bit, a wild hairstyle. And this in 2002 was not the norm in Wyoming. I'm sorry it is today, but wasn't then. But I didn't see anything indicating that she was one of those rebellious teens. As a matter of fact, when I asked for the registration and proof of insurance, she went right into the glove box to help her mom get these documents out. Her mother was very composed. And this puzzled me because she just got stopped for 97 miles an hour. And that's not normal. So the two of them seemed to work together pretty well in this odd circumstance that they found themselves in, and that wasn't normal. There was a pair of crutches in the back seat of the car, and there was a cooler that had a familiar design to me. It had rounded corners, and I recognized after a couple of minutes that I've seen those kinds of coolers before, because we would use them to transport snake bite venom, anti-venom, drugs, and blood on emergency runs. So I had this woman step back to my car, and I was talking to her. She was on her way from Denver to Gillette, where she lives. And she said that she has to go make that run frequently for her daughter's medical treatments. And I said, are the crutches in the car your daughter's? And she said, yes. And I said, what kind of medical treatments are you going through? And she said, my daughter's undergoing chemotherapy. She said, if you're interested in the cooler in the car, you can look through it. There are chemotherapy drugs in there. So as I finished up my contact, she said, or I said to her, I said, you know, and this is unusual for me, I said, you are the only person in Wyoming today that's getting a warning for 97 miles an hour. And she looked at me very calmly and she said, I know. She never said thank you. And then I said, what was your daughter's question? And she said, she wants to know if you're the officer on television. And I said I was. And she looked at me in the eye, and she said, I'm so very sorry. Got in her car and left. This was 1998. Drunk drivers are still out there, still killing innocent people. If you think this won't happen to you, I've got something to say. It can happen to anyone. How do I know? I know because a drunk driver killed my only child. She was 5 years old. We have to make this stop. This is 1998. I wrote this and helped produce this PSA. It ran for a long time because it was fairly popular in my state. Now, shortly after this collision, I had a victim's advocate from MADD in my living room. And she was a very young, new volunteer. She was very enthusiastic, and she was going to solve the world, starting with me. And I was a 15-year veteran of the road who knew that the system was broken. I was faced with the prospect that the person who was a .22 that killed my daughter might do 5 years probation. I knew the prosecutor, I knew the judges, I knew the whole system. And she was going to solve everything with me. At the time, this was the mission statement of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. The mission of Mothers Against Drunk Driving is to stop drunk driving and support the victims of this violent crime. I told this advocate, I said, I have a problem with your organization, and you need to know that, because you're not going to stop drunk driving. You may slow it down, you may reduce it, but you're not going to stop it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that was almost 17 years ago when we were having that conversation. Today, I am completely convinced otherwise. Shortly after starting with MADD, some 8.5 years ago, I attended a conference in New Mexico that we had hosted where we put people together in the same room that had never been in the same room before. We put technologists in the same room with automobile manufacturers from all around the world. We had people there from ignition interlock companies and researchers that were working in those areas. We took a look at what works and what doesn't, and we came up with, through that conference, what we refer to as the campaign to eliminate drunk driving. Number one, it's only 3 parts. It's very simple, and those of you that have been around a while, you've probably heard this, I hope. Number one, we support you. We support law enforcement. We support the criminal justice system, and we support our heroes who make the roads safe. We support high visibility law enforcement. We know that catches drunk drivers and discourages others from drunk driving. Number two, we push for ignition interlocks, all offenders, all states, all around the country. And at the time we were holding that conference, there was only one state in the country that had all offender ignition interlocks, and that was New Mexico, where the conference was cited. And now there are 22. There were several states that didn't have ignition interlock laws at all, and now all states have ignition interlock laws. We know they work. Now, the technologists that we had there were working on a system that could tell alcohol levels by a couple of different ways, and one of them was using near-infrared light. They were out at the University of New Mexico, and they were testing for blood sugar levels through the skin of people that had diabetes. And every Monday morning, the students had other substances registering in their equipment. It was alcohol levels. And they found that their system that they were developing wasn't that great at detecting sugar levels, but it was really good at detecting alcohol. Now, we put those people with the car manufacturers and said, can you come up with a device that would make the car, or have the car, make a determination whether or not someone is safe to drive? These people are working on technology that could tell you that. Can you put it in a car? The interlock people were there. They were like, do you know what it's like to wire a Mercedes-Benz with an interlock? There's computers in cars that are registering voltage drops and things like this, and it's very, very difficult. Can you put a USB port underneath the dashboard of a car so that we can plug into that? USB ports are kind of magic. I mean, this works off a USB port. You just plug it in and it knows what this is. Can we just plug in an interlock so the car knows what that is? Those kinds of things were discussed. We looked at what works and what doesn't. Now we're getting very close. On the future technology, it's been mentioned in here. It might be a foot race between driverless vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and the technology that's being developed in this DAD system that's been referred to, driver alcohol systems for safety. That has received about $200 million in research money from the federal government in partnership with the automobile manufacturers, and it's currently under testing at Harvard University right now. We're getting very, very close. Specific to Texas, I want to move on a little bit and bring it a little bit home. So that's the national scale, and this is our campaign. It's been going on now for 7 years plus. But specific to Texas, I want to talk a little bit to you guys. We do rating the states. It's very controversial. Some of our state police partners get blamed for lower ratings. So we have to soothe their nerves because the governor calls, and things like this take place in the political spectrum. But in Texas, we would like to see 5 things that we rate states on. We'd like to see 2 more that Texas already has. Texas already has ALR, or automatic license revocation. I want to make a mention about that here in a minute. Texas already has good child endangerment laws. We appreciate that. We want to make sure that everybody's using those. And Texas already is the birthplace, really, of no refusal. And we're also working on that around the country to spread that word using Texas presenters. What Texas is lacking in, and what we would like to see, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the debates on this, is we want to see ignition interlocks for all offenders. Texas certainly has them for second offense and up, and they have them for high BAC. There's a lot of good research on interlocks. This is for repeat offenders, and it's showing reduction rates in recidivism of 81, 96, 64, 75, 72, and the same kind of numbers applied to first offenders in recidivism rates. It's really good stuff. There's lots and lots and lots of research about this, so there's no question that they work. Now, before I get into that, I want to talk next about checkpoints. And I want to tell you that I have the two most, my two favorite PowerPoint slides ever about checkpoints. There was a time in the 1980s, this was a study from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. There was a time in the 1980s when high visibility enforcement was fairly new in the country. Montgomery County, Maryland started doing checkpoints. At the same time, there was a study done because Fairfax County, Virginia, did not. Now, both these communities are suburbs of Washington, D.C. They're very close in size, demographics, and everything else. So it was a prime location to study high visibility enforcement. And since checkpoints were new, in this area, the media is very strong. Word was getting out about checkpoints that Montgomery County was doing, and it was very controversial, very talked about. There was a lot of debate about the constitutionality of this, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Montgomery, during a year's time, was doing 30 to 50 sobriety checkpoints in Montgomery County, Maryland. Fairfax County, Virginia was not doing any. They were relying on their regular patrols. They were relying on what they referred to as saturation or wolf packs, same things we do here in Texas. Now you can see that Fairfax County, per 10,000 drivers, was out arresting people in Montgomery County 3-to-1. 96 drivers per 10,000. Montgomery, 31 per 10,000. 3-to-1 advantage Fairfax County. All right? Then they asked residents of Montgomery County, in what county are you most likely to be arrested for drunk driving? And Montgomery County residents said Montgomery County. Then they asked Fairfax County residents, where are you most likely to be arrested? And Fairfax County residents said Montgomery County. Again, Fairfax arresting 3-to-1 on Montgomery County. Montgomery County is doing the checkpoints, though. And that made big news, and that made people talk. And that brings in the other part that I like about high visibility enforcement. We'll talk a little bit more about checkpoints, but I boil it down to two guys in a bar, and then a third walks in. And the third walks in and he says, man, he says, the cops are everywhere. They've got cop cars all over this place, and they got signs up on the highway that say DUI arrest area. Now, the two guys that are in the bar, what are they going to do? Let's spend a night in here and get sloshed. Maybe go out jackrabbit hunting in my truck. No, they're going to finish their drinks and go home. And that's high visibility enforcement. It's no more complicated than that. A guy walks in a bar, two friends are in there, he says, there's a checkpoint right down the road. In checkpoint states, in checkpoint areas. And the controversy in law enforcement community itself is, well, people are texting now. And so they spot these checkpoints and they text their friends and everybody drives around the checkpoint. That's okay. They're talking, about things that make people think. Maybe I shouldn't drink as much as I wanted to. Maybe I need a ride home tonight. That's what happens when they get the text. Another point that I want to make about checkpoints. They're under attack when this legislation comes before the Texas State Legislature for a variety of reasons. And one of them is that they need to be cited, and the Texas laws that are drawn up, the bills that are drawn up, include this. They need to be cited where you have a high incidence of crashes. The reason why that's in the law, or the bills that are being drafted, is because people are concerned about racial profiling. But let me ask you a question. I'll ask a couple of questions of the uniformed officers here. How many of you are out working DUIs? Okay? Back to high visibility. How many of you that are actively working DUIs think, well, are you all working in marked cars? Is anybody working in an unmarked car? I see 2 hands go up. There's 2 detectives back there that used to work drunk driving. All right. Of the people that raised your hands that are working actively in drunk driving, how many people here think that if I had an unmarked car, I could fill the jail? Because I could sneak up on those people, and they'd never know I was there. True? You bet. But if you stop somebody, and even if you're putting the handcuffs on them, do people driving by know what's going on? No. If you're in an unmarked car and you're putting handcuffs on somebody, well, that guy probably didn't pay his library fine. And that's not a real cop. Seriously. But if you're in a marked car, in an area where you got signs up that say DUI arrest zone, and there's cars everywhere, marked cars everywhere, they know why you're there. When you're putting handcuffs on people, they know why you're putting handcuffs on people. All right. Racial profiling. How many people are supervisors in the room? All right. If you have an officer working for you that just kind of is having a low spot in his career and they haven't made any DUI arrests for a while, and you sit them down in a performance standard conversation and you say, listen, I need you to go make some arrests. As a matter of fact, by the end of the week, if you don't make 3 DUI arrests, I'm going to send you back to the academy, and you're going to go through the DUI school with the rookies with a traffic cone on your head. All right? Now, that officer is going to go out and make an arrest. And where is he going to go? He is going to go, ladies and gentlemen, to a target-rich environment. He's going to go to a place where there's a lot of drinking and driving. He's going to go to a place where maybe the cars are not well maintained and taken care of, because you can stop somebody for not having a tail light out in certain parts of the city where you know they don't fix their tail lights, they don't take care of their lives, and they don't care if they're drinking and driving. That, my friends, is generally considered to be a minority area. And that's not where we want to cite checkpoints. Lots and lots of studies on checkpoints and their effectiveness. Where do we cite them? Areas where we have a collision problems that involves drunk driving. And again, what happens, on the other hand, when an officer in a non-checkpoint state is told to go find a drunk driver? That's going to result in racial profiling. So this session, let's take those arguments to the legislature and ask them about checkpoints in Texas. And then finally, I want to say that I know that I kind of I took you somewhat by surprise when I started this talk. But that's what this preventable crime of drunk driving does. It takes people by surprise, innocent people. And I know this. And many of you do also. So that's why we need to eliminate drunk driving. Thank you very much.